The sound of splintering wood pierced the stillness of the night as a massive tree branch came crashing through the living room window of Natalie's suburban home. She dove to the floor, shielding her head as shards of glass rained down around her. Scrambling to her feet, Natalie's heart pounded as she took in the scene of destruction. The intruding branch had demolished her favorite armchair and sent debris scattering across the hardwood floors. Adrenaline surging, she rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. A fierce storm was raging, howling winds whipping through the neighborhood and casting an eerie glow from the flickering streetlights. Natalie's gaze fixed on the towering oak tree in her front yard, its thick limbs swaying dangerously in the gusts. Asterisk, that's the tree Mrs. Wilkins has been harping about for months. Asterisk, Natalie thought, her jaw tightening with anger. As the Homeowners Association president, the overbearing Mrs. Wilkins had been relentless in her demands that Natalie remove the tree, citing concerns about property values and liability. Natalie had resisted, unwilling to part with the majestic oak that had graced her family's home for decades. But now, as she surveyed the damage, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. Asterisk, what if Mrs. Wilkins was right? Asterisk. A sudden crash from the kitchen snapped Natalie's attention away from the window. She hurried to investigate, only to find her back door lying in splinters on the floor, a gaping hole leading out to the raging storm. Asterisk, oh no, the kids. Asterisk, Natalie's mind raced as she thought of her 2 young children, who had been sleeping soundly upstairs. Steeling herself, she rushed toward the staircase, determined to ensure their safety. But before she could reach the stairs, a figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the flashing lightning outside. Natalie froze, her breath catching in her throat, as the imposing form of Mrs. Wilkins stepped into the house, her face twisted in a menacing grin. "Good evening, Natalie," the HOA president drawled, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Quite a mess you've got here." Natalie's pulse quickened as she realized the implications of Mrs. Wilkins' unexpected and unwelcome presence. Asterisk, she couldn't have. "No, it's not possible." Asterisk. "What have you done?" Natalie demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. Mrs. Wilkins chuckled, the sound sending a chill down Natalie's spine. "I'm merely taking matters into my own hands, my dear. After all, it's my duty as president of this HOA to ensure the safety and well-being of our community." Natalie's blood ran cold as she understood the horrifying truth. Asterisk, Mrs. Wilkins had deliberately caused the destruction to her home, all to prove her point about the tree. Asterisk. Before Natalie could react, a sudden crash from upstairs jolted her into action. Pushing past Mrs. Wilkins, she raced up the stairs, praying that her children were unharmed. As she reached the top landing, Natalie's world lurched. The hallway was in shambles, the walls peppered with gaping holes, and the ceiling above caving in. And there, buried under the debris, were the motionless forms of her 2 children. Natalie's anguished scream shattered the night, echoing through the storm-ravaged neighborhood as she rushed to their aid, her mind reeling with the devastating realization that Mrs. Wilkins had gone too far. The storm continued to rage, and Natalie's world had been forever changed. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. Natalie's world had ground to a shattering halt as she rushed to the aid of her 2 children, buried beneath the debris of the collapsed ceiling. Panic gripped her heart as she frantically cleared away the rubble, praying that they were still alive. With a surge of relief, she found that her children, 9-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Ethan, were breathing, though unconscious. Natalie gently scooped them into her arms, cradling their limp forms as she carried them to safety. Stepping back into the shattered remains of her living room, Natalie's gaze fell upon the imposing figure of Mrs. Wilkins, who stood watching with a twisted smile. Rage bubbled up within her, and Natalie had to fight the urge to lunge at the despicable woman. "How could you do this?" Natalie cried, her voice thick with anguish and disbelief. "They're just children." Mrs. Wilkins merely shrugged, her expression unrepentant. Collateral damage, I'm afraid. The safety of the community must come first. Natalie's grip on her children tightened as she stared at the HOA president, her mind racing. Asterisk, she's gone mad with power. There's no reasoning with her asterisk. You're a monster. Natalie spat, her vision blurring with tears. I won't let you get away with this. Mrs. Wilkins chuckled, unfazed by Natalie's accusation. Oh, my dear, but I already have. The authorities will arrive soon, and they'll see that I was simply acting in the best interests of the neighborhood. Natalie's heart sank as she realized the truth of Mrs. Wilkins' words. The HOA president had orchestrated this entire disaster, manipulating the situation to make it appear as though she had been the one to protect the community. Asterisk, and with her connections and influence, she'll likely get away with it, asterisk, Natalie thought bitterly. Clutching her children close, Natalie knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't let Mrs. Wilkins' twisted scheme succeed, not when the lives of her innocent kids were at stake. Summoning every ounce of courage, Natalie made a split-second decision. Turning on her heel, she dashed toward the shattered back door, her only thought to get her children to safety. Mrs. Wilkins let out a frustrated growl, immediately giving chase. Where do you think you're going, Natalie? You can't escape me. Natalie ran, her legs pumping as she navigated the debris-strewn yard. The roar of the storm was deafening, the howling winds whipping her hair and stinging her eyes. She could hear Mrs. Wilkins' heavy footsteps closing in behind her, the woman's labored breathing testament to her desperation to catch up. Reaching the edge of her property, Natalie's gaze landed on the towering oak tree, its branches swaying menacingly in the wind. Asterisk my only chance. Asterisk, she thought, stealing her nerves. Clutching her children tightly, Natalie made a beeline for the tree, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear Mrs. Wilkins' enraged shouts, urging her to stop, but Natalie refused to listen. Reaching the base of the tree, Natalie braced herself and began to climb, her fingers finding purchase in the rough bark as she scaled a massive trunk. The wind threatened to knock her off balance, but she pressed on, determined to reach the safety of the upper branches. Mrs. Wilkins appeared at the base of the tree, her face contorted with fury. Natalie, get down here right now. This is your last warning. Ignoring the woman's demands, Natalie continued her ascent, her sole focus on protecting her children. She could feel the storm intensifying around her, the tree swaying more violently with each passing moment. Asterisk, just a little further, asterisk, she thought, her muscles straining with the effort. Asterisk, hold on, kids. We're almost there, asterisk. As Natalie reached the upper canopy, she glanced down, her heart sinking at the sight of Mrs. Wilkins climbing up after her, her expression twisted with unbridled fury. The battle for survival had only just begun. Natalie's arms ached as she clung to the tree branch, her children cradled protectively against her chest. Below, Mrs. Wilkins was rapidly scaling the massive oak, her face contorted with rage. Asterisk, I have to keep going, asterisk, Natalie thought desperately, her gaze darting around the swaying branches, searching for a way to safety. The storm raged on, the howling winds threatening to tear Natalie and her children from their precarious perch. Glancing down, she watched in horror as Mrs. Wilkins closed the distance, her grasping hands mere feet away. Summoning every ounce of strength, Natalie pushed herself higher, her feet finding purchase on the slender limbs. She could feel the tree shuddering beneath her, its ancient wood creaking ominously. Give it up, Natalie, Mrs. Wilkins shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. You can't escape me. Natalie refused to listen, her sole focus on reaching the safety of the upper branches. As she climbed, a flash of lightning illuminated the scene, and she caught a glimpse of the destruction below. Her heart sank as she saw the extent of the damage to her home, the once stately structure now a crumbling shell. Debris littered the yard, and Natalie couldn't help but wonder if her family's beloved pets had managed to escape the calamity. Asterisk, focused, Natalie. The kids need you, she chided herself, forcing her attention back to the task at hand. Reaching a sturdy fork in the branches, Natalie carefully settled her children, securing them as best she could. Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and Natalie felt a surge of relief. "Mama?" the young girl whispered, her voice laced with confusion and fear. "Sheh. It's okay, sweetheart," Natalie soothed, pressing a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead. "We're safe up here, but you need to stay still, okay?" Lily nodded, her small hand gripping Natalie's shirt. Ethan remained unconscious, his breathing shallow, and Natalie's heart ached at the sight. A sudden movement below caught her eye, and Natalie's breath caught in her throat as Mrs. Wilkins came into view, her features twisted with malice. "Clever, Natalie," the HOA president sneered, "but you can't hide from me up there forever. I'll find a way to get you down, one way or another." Natalie's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to protect her children. She couldn't let Mrs. Wilkins get her hands on them, not after the woman's callous disregard for their safety. As Mrs. Wilkins continued her ascent, Natalie's gaze landed on a thick branch extending out over the yard. An idea began to form, and she knew it was her only chance. Carefully maneuvering herself and her children, Natalie inched her way along the branch, her heart pounding in her ears. The storm raged on, the tree swaying violently, but she refused to lose her grip. Reaching the end of the branch, Natalie steeled her nerves and took a deep breath. This is it. With a wordless cry, she launched herself and her children into the air, the branch acting as a makeshift springboard. For a moment, they were suspended in midair, the yard rushing up to meet them. Natalie clenched her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, but it never came. Instead, she felt the branch beneath her shift and bend, cushioning their fall. Daring to open her eyes, she found herself and her children cradled in the sturdy embrace of the oak tree, its branches enveloping them like a protective shield. Breathless, Natalie looked down to see Mrs. Wilkins staring up at them, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. "No," the HOA president screamed, her voice laced with desperation. "This can't be happening." Natalie allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The tree that Mrs. Wilkins had so desperately sought to destroy had now become their salvation. But the battle was far from over, and Natalie knew that she would need to summon every ounce of her strength and determination to protect her family from the relentless Mrs. Wilkins. Natalie clung to her children, her heart pounding as she watched Mrs. Wilkins below, the HOA president's face twisted with a mixture of shock and rage. The massive oak tree had become their unexpected savior, its sturdy branches enveloping Natalie and her family in a protective embrace. "How dare you!" Mrs. Wilkins shrieked, her voice cutting through the howling wind. "Get down here this instant, Natalie." Natalie tightened her grip on Lily and Ethan, her gaze unwavering as she met the other woman's furious stare. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Mrs. Wilkins. You've gone too far, and I won't let you hurt my children again." The HOA president's lips curled into a snarl, her fingers clawing at the tree trunk as she continued her desperate ascent. "This is all your fault, Natalie. If you would just listen to me and remove that damned tree, none of this would have happened." Natalie felt a surge of anger at the woman's twisted logic. "You're the one who caused this disaster, Mrs. Wilkins. I know what you've done, and I won't let you get away with it." Mrs. Wilkins let out a harsh laugh, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, but I already have. By the time the authorities arrive, they'll see that I was simply trying to protect the community. And you?" Her gaze narrowed dangerously. "You'll be the one who's arrested for obstructing justice." Natalie's blood ran cold at the implication, her mind racing to find a way to counter the HOA president's scheme. She's right. Without any evidence, my word against hers won't be enough. As Mrs. Wilkins continued her climb, Natalie scanned the swaying branches, searching for a way to escape. Her eyes landed on a thick limb extending out over the street, and an idea began to take shape. Carefully maneuvering herself and her children, Natalie edged her way toward the branch, her every move calculated and precise. The storm raged on, the tree shuddering beneath their weight, but she refused to let her grip falter. Reaching the end of the branch, Natalie paused, taking a deep breath. This is it. Hold on to me, kids, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. We're going to jump. Lily's eyes widened in alarm, and Ethan stirred, his small face scrunched in confusion. Mama, what's happening? The little boy asked, his voice laced with panic. It's going to be okay, sweetheart, Natalie soothed, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I need you to trust me, okay? We're going to get away from that woman, but you have to hold on tight. Lily and Ethan nodded, their small hands clinging to Natalie's shirt as she positioned them for the leap. Taking one last look at the rapidly approaching Mrs. Wilkins, Natalie steeled her nerves and jumped. The world seemed to slow down as they soared through the air, the streetlights below drawing ever closer. Natalie tightened her grip on her children, her heart pounding in her ears. Just as they were about to hit the ground, Natalie felt a sudden jerk, and she looked up to see the branch they had leaped from whipping down to catch them, its thick limbs wrapping around their bodies like a safety net. Natalie let out a shaky laugh, relief flooding her as she realized the tree had once again come to their aid. Glancing back, she saw Mrs. Wilkins frozen on the branch, her face a mask of pure fury. No, the HOA president screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. This can't be happening. Natalie allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. It's over, Mrs. Wilkins. Your reign of terror ends here. As the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, Natalie knew that the battle had only just begun. But for now, she and her children were safe, thanks to the unlikely hero that had once been the bane of their existence. The wail of sirens pierced the air as emergency vehicles converged on Natalie's storm-ravaged neighborhood. Clutching her children close, Natalie watched from the protective embrace of the oak tree as a fleet of police cars and fire trucks swarmed the area, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over the scene of destruction. Below, Mrs. Wilkins stood frozen, her face a mask of rage and desperation as the authorities approached. Natalie's heart raced with a mixture of relief and trepidation, knowing that the confrontation was far from over. As the first responders fanned out, Natalie heard the distinct sound of a megaphone crackling to life, and she tensed, bracing herself for what was to come. This is the police, a stern voice bellowed. Mrs. Wilkins, we have you surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Natalie watched as the HOA president's expression shifted, a cold, calculating look replacing the previous fury. With a casual wave of her hand, she gestured toward the tree, her lips curling into a sinister smile. Officers, I'm so glad you're here, she called out, her voice dripping with false concern. My neighbor, Natalie, has been holding her children hostage up in that tree. I've been trying to reason with her, but she refuses to come down. Natalie's heart sank as she realized the depths of Mrs. Wilkins' deception. She's turning this whole thing around, making me the villain. That's not true. Natalie shouted, her voice desperate. Mrs. Wilkins is the one who's been terrorizing us. She's the one who caused all this destruction. But her pleas fell on deaf ears as the police officers began to converge on the tree, their weapons drawn and their expressions grim. Ma'am, we need you and your children to come down from the tree immediately. One of the officers commanded, his voice firm. We'll handle this situation, but you need to cooperate with us. Natalie's mind raced, her heart pounding as she realized the gravity of the situation. If I come down, Mrs. Wilkins will have one. But if I don't, they'll arrest me and take the kids. Glancing down at Lily and Ethan, Natalie knew she had no choice. She had to protect her children, no matter the cost. Okay, officers, she called out, her voice trembling. were coming down. Carefully, Natalie began to descend the tree, her movements slow and deliberate. As she reached the ground, she was immediately surrounded by the police, their weapons trained on her. "Ma'am, please step away from the children and put your hands behind your back," one of the officers commanded. Natalie's breath caught in her throat as she complied, her children clinging to her in fear. Asterisk, this can't be happening. I have to do something, but what asterisk? As the officers moved to handcuff her, a sudden commotion erupted nearby, and Natalie's gaze snapped to the source of the disturbance. Mrs. Wilkins was standing in the middle of the chaos, her expression twisted with triumph as she addressed the gathered crowd of onlookers. "As the president of this homeowners association, I can assure you all that Natalie is the one responsible for this entire incident," she declared, her voice booming. "She's been harassing me and the rest of the community for months, refusing to comply with our regulations. And now, she's put her own children in danger by barricading herself in that tree." Natalie watched in horror as the crowd began to murmur in agreement, their expressions shifting from concern to suspicion. Asterisk, no, this can't be happening. Asterisk, she thought, her vision blurring with tears. Asterisk, Mrs. Wilkins is turning everyone against me. Asterisk. As the officers moved to escort her away, Natalie knew that the battle was far from over. She had to find a way to expose the truth and clear her name, no matter the cost. The war for control of the neighborhood had reached a critical juncture, and Natalie was determined to emerge victorious. Natalie sat in the back of the police cruiser, her wrists bound in handcuffs as she watched the scene unfold outside. Mrs. Wilkins was holding court, her voice carrying over the din of the crowd as she spun her web of deceit. Asterisk, I have to do something. Asterisk, Natalie thought frantically, her gaze darting from her children, who were being comforted by a firefighter, to the officers who were guiding her toward the waiting squad car. As the vehicle door opened, Natalie caught a glimpse of Mrs. Wilkins' triumphant expression, and a surge of determination coursed through her. Asterisky won't let her get away with this asterisk. "Wait," Natalie cried, her voice sharp and commanding. The officers paused, and she seized the opportunity. "Please, you have to listen to me. Mrs. Wilkins is lying. She's the one who's been terrorizing my family and orchestrating this entire disaster." The officers exchanged a hesitant glance, and Natalie could see the uncertainty flicker across their faces. They were clearly torn, caught between the conflicting narratives being presented. "Ma'am, we understand you're upset, but the evidence seems to point to your involvement in this incident," one of the officers said, his tone measured. "Mrs. Wilkins has made some very serious allegations against you." Natalie felt her heart sink, but she refused to give up. "Please, you have to believe me. Mrs. Wilkins is the one who's been abusing her power as the HOA president. She's the one who deliberately caused the damage to my home and put my children in danger." The officers exchanged another look, and Natalie could see the internal struggle playing out on their faces. She knew she had to act quickly, before Mrs. Wilkins' influence swayed them completely. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the chaos, and Natalie felt a surge of hope. "Officers, wait," a woman called out, pushing her way through the crowd. It was Natalie's next-door neighbor, Sarah, her usually calm demeanor replaced by a fierce determination. "Sarah?" one of the officers questioned, his brow furrowed. "You have to listen to Natalie," Sarah insisted, her gaze locked on the officers. "Mrs. Wilkins is the one behind all of this. She's been abusing her power as the HOA president for years, and she's the one who's responsible for the damage to Natalie's home." The officers hesitated, their grip on Natalie loosening as they considered Sarah's words. Natalie seized the opportunity, turning to face the crowd. "Please, everyone," she cried, her voice laced with desperation. "You have to understand. Mrs. Wilkins is the real threat here. She's been manipulating all of us, using her position of power to terrorize the neighborhood. She's the one who caused this destruction, not me." As Natalie's words echoed through the crowd, she saw the expressions on their faces shift, a glimmer of doubt creeping in. Mrs. Wilkins' confident facade began to falter, and Natalie knew she had to press her advantage. "Look around you," Natalie continued, her gaze sweeping over the scene of devastation. "This is the work of a madwoman, not a concerned neighbor. Mrs. Wilkins has gone too far, and she has to be stopped before she can do any more harm." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Natalie could see the officers exchanging a silent conversation. Finally, one of them stepped forward, his expression grave. "Mrs. Wilkins, we're going to need you to come with us," he said, his voice firm. "We have some questions for you regarding the damage to Natalie's property and the alleged threats against her family." Mrs. Wilkins' face contorted with rage, and she opened her mouth to protest, but the officers cut her off. "Ma'am, you're under arrest. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Mrs. Wilkins was led away in handcuffs, Natalie felt a wave of relief wash over her. The battle was far from over, but for now, the tables had turned. The sound of cuffs clicking around Mrs. Wilkins' wrists echoed through the night as the disgraced HOA president was led away by the police. Natalie watched, a surge of satisfaction swelling within her as the woman who had terrorized her family was finally brought to justice. But even as the initial relief began to set in, Natalie couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Mrs. Wilkins was a formidable opponent, and Natalie knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. As the police officers escorted the struggling Mrs. Wilkins to a waiting squad car, Natalie turned her attention to her children, Lily and Ethan, who were being tended to by a team of paramedics. Rushing to their side, she enveloped them in a fierce hug, tears of gratitude streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, my babies, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise, I'll never let anything like this happen to you again." Lily and Ethan clung to their mother, their small bodies trembling with the aftermath of the ordeal. Natalie's heart ached, knowing that the trauma they had endured would likely leave lasting scars. A gentle hand on her shoulder drew Natalie's attention, and she turned to find Sarah, her next-door neighbor, standing beside her, her expression a mix of concern and relief. "Natalie, are you and the kids okay?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with worry. Natalie nodded, giving her friend a weary smile. "We're shaken, but we're alive, thanks to you." Sarah's brow furrowed, and she glanced around at the chaos that surrounded them. "What the hell happened here, Nat?" "I heard the commotion and came running as soon as I could." Natalie sighed, her gaze drifting to the now subdued Mrs. Wilkins. "It's a long story, Sarah, and I'm not sure I even fully understand it myself. But one thing is clear. Mrs. Wilkins is at the center of it all. She's been abusing her power as the HOA president, and she's the one responsible for the damage to my home and the danger my family was put in." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, and she shook her head. "I always knew that woman was trouble, but I never imagined she'd go this far. What a monster." Natalie nodded, her expression darkening. "And I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg. Mrs. Wilkins has a lot of influence in this community, and I'm sure she's not going to go down without a fight." As if on cue, the sound of a car door slamming drew their attention, and Natalie watched in dismay as Mrs. Wilkins was ushered into the back of the police car, her features twisted in a malevolent scowl. "This isn't over, Natalie," the disgraced HOA president shouted, her voice laced with fury. "You think you've won, but I still have more cards to play. I'll make sure you and your brats pay for this." Natalie felt a chill run down her spine at the woman's words, and she instinctively pulled her children closer, her protective instincts kicking into overdrive. "Don't worry, Nat," Sarah said, her voice steady and reassuring. "We're all behind you. The whole neighborhood saw what Mrs. Wilkins has done, and we're not going to let her get away with it." Natalie nodded, her resolve hardening. She knew that the battle was far from over, and that Mrs. Wilkins would stop at nothing to regain the power she had lost. But she was determined to stand her ground, to fight for her family and her community. As the police car pulled away, Natalie couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She knew that Mrs. Wilkins would be back, and that the war for control of the neighborhood was just beginning. The night air was thick with tension as Natalie watched the police car carrying the defeated Mrs. Wilkins disappear down the street. Despite the temporary victory, she knew that the battle was far from over. The disgraced HOA president had made it clear that she had no intention of going down without a fight, and Natalie braced herself for the oncoming storm. Turning her attention to her children, Lily and Ethan, Natalie felt a wave of protectiveness wash over her. The trauma they had endured was etched on their faces, and she silently vowed to do whatever it took to keep them safe. "Mama, what's going to happen now?" Lily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Natalie pulled her daughter close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mama's not going to let anyone hurt you or your brother ever again. We're going to be okay." Ethan, still recovering from the ordeal, remained silent, his eyes downcast. Natalie's heart ached at the sight, and she knew that the road ahead would be difficult, both emotionally and physically. As the paramedics finished their initial assessment, Natalie turned to Sarah, her expression grave. "Sarah, I need your help," she said, her voice low and serious. "Mrs. Wilkins isn't going to stop, and I can't protect my family on my own. I need to find a way to expose her corruption and take her down for good." Sarah nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. "You've got it, Nat. I'll rally the rest of the neighborhood and start digging into Mrs. Wilkins' past. We're not going to let her get away with this." Natalie felt a glimmer of hope at her friend's words, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that was gnawing at her. Mrs. Wilkins was a formidable opponent, and Natalie knew that she would stop at nothing to reclaim her power. As the police and emergency crews continued to secure the area, Natalie's gaze drifted to the towering oak tree that had become their unlikely savior. Its branches, once the source of so much conflict, now stood as a silent testament to the resilience of her family. Asterisk, if it weren't for this tree, asterisk, Natalie thought, asterisk, who knows what would have happened to us, asterisk. A sudden realization struck her, and she knew what she had to do. Turning to Sarah, she spoke with a newfound determination. "Sarah, I need you to do something else for me. I want you to find the best arborist in the area and have them come take a look at this tree. We're going to do whatever it takes to protect it, no matter what Mrs. Wilkins tries to do." Sarah's eyes widened in understanding, and she nodded quickly. "Consider it done, Nat. This tree has become a symbol of your family's strength, and we're not going to let it be destroyed, not on our watch." As the hours ticked by, Natalie and her neighbors worked tirelessly to secure the area and gather evidence against Mrs. Wilkins. The HOA president's abuses of power were slowly but surely coming to light, and Natalie knew that they were finally on the road to reclaiming their community. But even as the dawn began to break, Natalie couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. She knew that Mrs. Wilkins would not go down without a fight, and that the war for control of the neighborhood was far from over. As she tucked her children into bed, their faces still haunted by the events of the night, Natalie made a silent vow. "Asterisky will do whatever it takes to protect my family, no matter the cost. Mrs. Wilkins will not win, not this time, asterisk." The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. Natalie was ready to fight, and she knew that her community was standing beside her, united in their determination to take down the tyrannical HOA president once and for all.